Good evening, and thanks for joining us here at Commonwealth Club World Affairs. My name is Ben Trefny. I'm the executive producer at the Bay Area's KALW Public Media. This evening, we're holding the first of 3 deep dives into opportunities for San Francisco in the constantly changing and sometimes turbulent times that we live in. Thanks to Levi Strauss & Company for supporting this program series. We're going through a lot right now. Tech booms, the COVID pandemic, a warming climate, and so many more variables. They're continuously creating both disruptions and new opportunities for us all. And we've obviously got some major challenges, but this is a city known for innovation and entrepreneurialism, and we have people, natural assets, and institutions that can drive forward new realizations of what our city can be. That's what we're all here to talk about tonight. Joining me, right to my left here, is Simon Bertrand, Executive Director at SF New Deal. And Sarah Dennis Phillips, Executive Director at San Francisco's Office of Economic and Workforce Development. And Kevin Nguyen, business reporter at the SF Standard. All right, so we're going to warm up with a question to create a foundation for this conversation. And that is, why do you care about downtown San Francisco? And Simon, let's begin with you. Why do you care about this place?
So the obvious reason, which we, in partnership with OAWD, are convinced that downtown San Francisco is actually the key to the fiscal recovery of the entire city. So everything that we love about our neighborhoods is going to be supported by the tax base downtown. But on a secondary level, we care about downtown because it's an opportunity to really build a neighborhood, an authentic San Francisco neighborhood, full of all the San Francisco cultural and commercial things that we care about. So I think we saw it as both a necessity and an opportunity to really to build a new neighborhood in San Francisco.
So it's an economic answer. What is your favorite thing in downtown that just drives you? When you see it, you're like, oh, I want to save that. I want to protect that.
My favorite thing about downtown is it's a beautiful, there's a bunch of beautiful buildings, and it feels like a fantastic place to be. And so if it's been just a 5-day-a-week business district, I am encouraged with the idea that we can all come downtown to enjoy the beautiful buildings and the beautiful public spaces that were just for the office workers previously.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, we just moved our offices downtown, and every single day, seeing the architecture, seeing the parks, exploring and discovering, it's amazing. So Sarah, same question to you. What is it that you care about in downtown San Francisco? Why do you care about downtown San Francisco?
So my answer is probably as wonky as Simon's first answer. Life is about human connection. Human connection is forged in and agglomerates through downtowns of cities. I figured that out. I decided to become an urban planner. The day I graduated from urban planning school, I decided to move here, and this became my city and my downtown. So it's pretty emotional.
What makes San Francisco, then, the place where you wanted to be? Is it because there was a job available, or is it because there's something about this place?
Oh, there's so much about this place. I came from Boston, and the idea of a place where ideas were wide open, where how and who you could be was wide open, and that all happens under the sun by the bay. Can't beat it.
Right on. All right. And then Kevin, how about you? Now, you're a business reporter, but covering real estate and a lot of the things going on here. I could ask you also, you're a person. Why do you care about downtown San Francisco?
Sources say, yeah. Look, I care because I suspect, like a lot of you guys in this room, I remember what it was like before this extinction level event we had, which was, the pandemic, right? And I use extinction tongue in cheek. I'm talking about like from a real estate and business standpoint. And just to piggyback with, what Sarah and Simon said here, this was, and it still is, in my opinion, the, urban destination of the West. And, and even walking around Union Square today, seeing tourists still approach the city with awe, that still sticks with me, and it's worth fighting for. So that's what I care. Yeah.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I like the F line. I love seeing the streetcars that go down through there from all these different world destinations, hearing it, riding it, even though it's like a wooden roller coaster. It's just awesome. All right, so Kevin, you recently reported on how this is the title of the article, the tech exodus looks bad for SF. but the doomsayers are wrong about the reasons. So can you expand on that for us? Tell us about this article.
Yeah, so for all you following the news last week, we saw, of course, Twitter or X making headlines by announcing it was going to leave the city. And then, elsewhere in the East Bay, we saw that, Chevron, the energy giant, also announced that it was going to decamp for Texas. And, my initial thinking in writing that article was that, gosh, whenever these happen, the knee-jerk reaction is to bash the city or the state that those businesses are leaving. And I just found that incredibly short-sighted, in that, when you dig deeper, you always find there's more context, more of the story. So I found that, look, companies move for a myriad of reasons. And yes, some of it can be on that, the existing place they're in is no longer beneficial to them, whether that be culturally or, financially. But it's not because suddenly Elon Musk woke up one day and said, gosh, I can't stand the homelessness around mid-market anymore.
Oh, I don't
Therefore,
know.
I'm going to leave,
Okay.
right? So yeah, I just wanted to push back on the notion that, because it just becomes so easy to bash the place you're leaving. And yeah, having followed this industry for a long time, I just knew there was more of the story.
All right. So Simon now. Your role, you lead SF New Deal, whose mission is to strengthen neighborhoods by making it easier for under-resourced small business owners to succeed. Can you tell us how SF New Deal got started, when it got started, and how it's evolved to meet changing times?
Yeah, so SF New Deal started a little over 4 years ago, and it started in March of 2020, which may be a traumatic month to remember. It was when the shelter-in-place orders were issued, and a group of friends got together, including a small business owner that was directly affected by the pandemic shutdowns, and realized that they had to do something. And so it was friends and volunteers at first, including a little bit of some private donations from some concerned citizens, and very quickly transitioned into some contracts with the city that were money from the federal government, FEMA money. But the idea behind SF New Deal was really that we could all come together so that the restaurants were needing to send their workers home because they didn't have any revenue. So SF New Deal thought, well, could we guarantee revenue for the restaurants? They can make meals, and they can make sure that they don't have to lay their workers off, and we can deliver the meals to people newly food insecure, newly in need of food. So it was an incredible moment, again, where we scaled in order to meet the need of the pandemic. And initially it was going to be maybe a few months, but it stretched into years. And so now, $45 million later, and 1.5 million meals later, we have transitioned into supporting more generally strengthening neighborhoods and supporting small businesses. And I think the thing we brought with us is this idea that solving the pandemic or responding to the pandemic was obviously a very difficult thing. And we have a lot of intractable problems in San Francisco. And we feel that by all approaching the problem together, by bringing in various stakeholders, city, private industry, small businesses, community, SF New Deal can convene these people, and we can attack or address some of the most intractable issues that we have today.
So you're talking about partnerships. We'll get into partnerships a little bit more because one of your partners is the Office of Economic and Workforce Development. So Sarah, you came into your role heading this office just a year ago now. And I'm wondering how the traditional job that you and your team with OEWD does, what it was before the pandemic and how that changed when the pandemic struck.
Yeah, it's changed a lot, both due to the pandemic and frankly due to Mayor Breed's desire to change how the city operates with regard to stakeholders. So a couple of things. On the downside, we didn't really do business attraction. We didn't need to. We probably spent more time trying to figure out how to manage and tax the growth of businesses than we did to foster it. We didn't really create jobs. We did have programs training our lowest capacity residents for the jobs that were here, but we weren't focused on job growth. That just happened in and of itself. And those are two areas where traditional economic development agencies operate that we're frankly building a muscle that we didn't have before. On the positive side, while we didn't operate like a traditional economic development agency before, we were one of the, and still are, one of the few meaningful city agencies that doesn't have a regulatory role. And that actually matters a lot because being free from executing the bureaucracy through a regulatory fashion allows us to be really nimble and be the party that can figure out how to work around it and how to chip it away. And that's a muscle we built before and we're really, really flexing now. It also allowed us to do pretty creative things like developing planning processes and economic strategies for the left behind parts of San Francisco, which wasn't downtown, but we've had neighborhoods that have been struggling for years. And I work in one of them in Civic Center adjacent to Tenderloin. It allowed us to do pretty deep work in our neighborhood commercial corridors with communities of color and people, to try to build an equity basis in our small business systems in those commercial corridors. So that's something we've been doing before and we've really leaned into more post-pandemic. And it allowed us to execute some pretty creative public-private partnerships. And that's a muscle that we found really meaningful now that we're back in. I think it's interesting because now we're not just finding our way around the bureaucracy, which is what we did before. We're hopefully trying to lead, and it's not just us because Mayor Breed's been very clear to all of her departments that we're trying to break down that bureaucracy and move more quickly through it. So that's been a big change as well.
So you two work together as part of at least one partnership that I'm very familiar with because KALW was recipient of one of the Vacant to Vibrant spaces in downtown San Francisco, which is a storefront on Montgomery Street between Pine and Bush Streets that has huge, beautiful plate glass windows and was empty for about 3 years. And then SF New Deal worked with Office of Economic and Workforce Development and Wells Fargo and a whole mess of landlords downtown to find 9 storefronts to make available and have essentially like I don't know what you would call it. Would you call it a grant or a competition or something like that? People would apply.
People would apply, and we did end up granting people up to $8,000. So it was not a lot of money.
But also 6 months of free
rent.
Free rent in this space to see what you could do to help revitalize that neighborhood and see what you could do as your own organization or business, your small business. And so that has been absolutely transformative for KALW. KALW, which has been around for over 80 years in the San Francisco Bay Area, has been located in the corner of a high school on the southeast side of the city, practically invisible physically, though it is on the air, and some of you might have heard it, 91.7 FM or podcasts or music or whatever it is. But now, because of Vacant to Vibrant and the partnership that you two created with other partners, which we want to get into, we now have a very visible space that has all kinds of passersby who see the 60 events, the 60 live events that we've held since October, since that program began, and then the extension with the landlord that we negotiated. And now we've become a much more integral part of what's happening in a visible way in downtown. So I'm wondering, how did that program even start? Because I like it.
So it started with a call by the city to find a partner to run a program that was going to place small businesses or fill vacant storefronts downtown. And so SF New Deal, we have worked in the neighborhoods mostly, but I think we thought we were compelled by the wonky version of what I said before, which is like the future of downtown is going to determine the future of San Francisco, just on a fiscal level. And so I think we were compelled to respond to that partnership request. We won the contract, and I think the thing that we have really learned is that we can't do it without partnership. In fact, it's the city wanted to form a public-private partnership to fill these vacant storefronts. We were able to put out a call for small businesses and entrepreneurs and artists to come downtown. Over 850 people raised their hand and said, we want to come downtown. We couldn't have done it without that energy, without the people who wanted to participate in the revitalization of downtown. We couldn't have done it without the property owners, the landlords who were willing to take the risks of turning over a vacant storefront to cultural organizations that were currently headquartered in high schools. So, and we were able to get some private funding as well. So I think all of these people need to be there to solve the problem, to solve the future of San Francisco's downtown. So from our perspective, the cities and OEWD's partnership was key to the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to build on that, I mean, what Simon's describing is not just true of the Vacant to Vibrant partnership of that program. It's true I mean, we're seeing it happen across the board. So to elaborate a little more on Vacant to Vibrant, you know, that, and some of this predates me, right? So I'm really glad you stepped in and answered first. They were actually selected before I came on board, so I bear no part in that. You know, the city, the mayor, we put out an idea. Our partner helps us figure out how does that really work on the ground? What are the pros and cons of it? Our partners on the ground, you know, in this case, landlords, small businesses, figure out how to execute that, and they execute it. And so you see all the layers that kind of trickle down. And as that partnership deepens, like just taking from Vacant to Vibrant, the work we do with SF New Deal is no longer we put an idea, you give us an idea on how to execute it. We're partnering on what ideas we should even put out there. And that happened with the mayor's funding for downtown that we just got approved in this year's budget. It also means that the brokers, the small businesses are giving us immediate feedback about how did this work? How did this work? What do we need to do with our next tranche of funding? How do we move it forward? And then when we talk about, you know, Wells Fargo, Visa, the other partners that kind of helped with this effort, that's the kind of momentum, Levi Strauss, who's sponsoring this, you're seeing that corporate momentum come in. And I'll say, you know, I've worked in public-ish capacities in the city for almost 24 years, and I have never seen political will towards partnerships like I've seen in this time. Numerous political workers have said this since Winston Churchill first said it, but like if you never waste a crisis, and I think the crisis here is really bringing people together and partnerships, even political partnerships that you wouldn't expect towards a common goal, which is really exciting.
But partnerships, while they have incredible values we're talking about and are a necessity, they're really complicated and messy and delicate. So it takes a lot of resources. So how do you manage that? Like how do either of you manage that?
I probably don't think it's as hard as Simon does because we're the bureaucracy, right? Like I'm thrilled to have the partnerships that we have. But I mean, part of the thing that's one of the reasons it's hard to manage, particularly working in a political and bureaucratic context, is there's just so many voices you need to listen to. And the voices that I need to listen to from the public sector side is different than the voices you're hearing from on the small business side. And that may be different from the voices we're hearing on the labor side or, you know, other perspectives. So the more you work with a partner, the more you trust them to kind of be honest about those and work them out together. It does make new partnerships harder. And I think that's why the beginning of the pandemic is a little bit of a bumpy road. We're still seeing those partnerships form and that trust build. It's not all fully gelled yet.
Yeah, I think trust is really the key because, and you know, with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development and SF New Deal, I think the trust was built because they set us a clear goal, you know, and then they asked us to figure out how to actually do it. And so they weren't prescribing, you know, exactly how the program needed to run. They were saying, this is what we want. You have these connections with small business owners. You can talk to the property owners. You can convince the property owners that it's worth taking this risk. And the trust that we have built with small business owners, you know, has actually made it easier for us to invite small business owners downtown. Mm-hmm. And the trust that we've now built with the property owners, you know, we're on the second cohort now of the Vacant to Vibrant, you know, and we're going to be, thanks to the mayor and the mayor's funding next year, we're going to be doing a more rolling kind of program where we're going to be placing small businesses on a rolling basis downtown. So Vacant to Vibrant is expanding, and the trust that we have built with the property owners through the first cohort, you know, has really been key. So partnerships, you have to build trust in order for partnerships to work, but it does help to start off with a clear understanding of responsibilities. I mean, the city gave us or brought the name Vacant to Vibrant, which has turned out to be kind of a fantastic
very
branding
marketable.
Name. So
yes.
Yeah, so that's an example of they brought the name, they brought the idea, they said this is our goal, and then they challenged us and they trusted us to figure out all the details, and there were a lot of them that we needed to solve in order to actually do this very simple thing of placing small businesses and artists and entrepreneurs and cultural organizations in vacant storefronts. Sounds easy.
Well, and then it also grows in different ways. You know, I mean, the live events that we have done at KALW have led to a lot of different opportunities. One, that's happening, which is another one of the expansions in downtown. The efforts that's taking place is Downtown First Thursdays, on the shutting down a Second Street with Into the Streets, and bringing a huge street party there. And KELW is programming 111 Minna, and actually September 5th, several of the business owners, small business owners working with Vacant to Vibrant, are going to be telling their stories on the stage at 111 Minna in kind of a moth style or mini TED Talk style to tell their journey as they start to, open up and have a new future down there. So just so you know, mark your calendar, September 5th.
Awesome.
So Kevin, haven't forgotten about you. I'm wondering, as we were talking about like how the pandemic changed things, like I said, KELW wasn't downtown. I had something of an idea, but how did you picture, can you paint a picture of what downtown was like pre-pandemic? Because it's obviously a different place now.
Yeah. To Sarah's point, I think when the times were good, broadly speaking, in the 2010s, when the explosion of the we call them like the mobile phone adjacent companies, took off and changed the city's skyline with it. I think conversations about partnerships, weren't really centered that way. They were more geared towards like, okay, how do we, tax on this growth, knowing that the foot traffic is going to be there, that the residents are coming in, development's coming in. That was the conversation, I think, in the last decade. What we're seeing now, and I think it's cool listening to you guys talk, is that everyone's kind of coming to terms with the same reality now. And by everyone, I mean City Hall, landlords, and entrepreneurs, business owners here. To answer your question, Ben, I mean, back then, I don't think we were thinking that way. I think, we were all watching the cost of everything go up, but a lot of people were still making money. But now it's we've all had to come to the table and be really realistic. And, only the people who are actually long on San Francisco, not just here for the good times, are going to be motivated to do things like that. The landlords who are well positioned and are not in bad debt are the ones who are going to be offering up their spaces to Vacant to Vibrant. And the City Hall that's motivated to foster activity now, as opposed to maybe taxing, is going to be, more willing to have those conversations. So that it's night and day, and it's more of a vibes thing. Of course, people can go out on the streets and notice that foot traffic is nowhere near the same as it used to be, 5 days a week here. And I think people forget that, the city's largest private tech employers have reduced their office footprint by over 50% since 2019. So that gives you an idea of the scale we're dealing with here in terms of the hole that we have to fill still.
Yeah,
Can
that's
I
interesting.
add on to that about
Please,
what
yeah.
downtown was like 5 years?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Just because I want to remind people, well, my perspective, downtown was never perfect, right? I mean, it was very active and it was very full, in large part due to a lot of high density offices that felt they had to be here to do their work. And that action covered up a lot of imperfections. But my first visit to San Francisco in 1998, I happened to arrive on a Saturday afternoon, and I got off on BART, and I'm not sure what station it was, maybe Montgomery. And I was like, there's this incredibly wide street with a few cars on it and no people, and none of the businesses were actually open on the weekend, by the way. Like how our downtown operated pre-pandemic was in no way perfect. And I just want to note that, just because while we think of it as bustling and busy and frankly generated a ton of tax revenue pre-pandemic, which is great, in terms of being a heart of the city, it was wanting in some areas. And I think what we're seeing now provides an opportunity to correct some of those wrongs.
So that actually leads to a question that one of our audience members asked, and as I see questions coming in, I'm going to see if we can kind of fit them in a way that makes sense in this conversation. But this is one. I think that we can start with you, Kevin. An audience member asked, do you see the conversion of office buildings to residences coming to fruition?
Yeah, we get this question a lot because in theory it sounds nice, right? It's like, okay, we've been sitting on empty office spaces for 4 years now. Can we do something with them? I will say that in reality, it's not practical in San Francisco right now. Of course, some things can change, right? Building ownership can change, the economy can change. But right now, broadly speaking, it's not profitable for developers to pursue at large. We have had massive conversion projects before. I'm thinking of, I think 100 Van Ness used to be a huge office building down in near Civic Center, and now that's a residential building, albeit it has some, kind of flaws right now too. But yeah, it's just really expensive to take a nice office building and to change it into a residential floor plan, because that's just totally different than an open floor office space, just broadly speaking.
So that's from a obviously pure dollars and cents model, and perhaps that's all it is. But when we talk about downtown being a heart of a city, then that is kind of what brings people there on a weekend and brings people there. I mean, it's not just weekends that businesses are closed. On weekdays after 3 p.m. they're closed because people aren't going to get lunch. And I mean, that's how it is on Montgomery Street. So is that the pure motivator for a lot of these real estate owners downtown, do you think? Or do you see any kind of push to reimagine what downtown is in a way that would create a more vibrant center for San Francisco?
I haven't seen a push from developers to pursue office to residential conversions, strictly speaking. What I have seen is more of a push towards how do we mix up the use cases we have here in a building here. We're no longer 100%, or we should no longer strive to be 100% office-based. How can we mix it up to have, I don't know, entertainment, gathering spaces, fun, retail, you name it. So I'm seeing a lot more of like mixed use in the conversation. I know like Sarah could probably chime in on that more, having come from that side as well. But, yeah.
Well, and I'm a little more optimistic on office to resi conversions and more residential downtown than Kevin, although I agree with absolutely everything he said. The reason I'm a little more optimistic is because I'm taking a long-term view, right? And when San Francisco does hard things all the time. Office to resi conversions are really hard. They're really expensive. The floor plate has to be just right. The political will has to be just right. We are making a lot of headway on some of those problems, right? Although it's imperfect, we had there are a couple of bills pending at the state. One, which has actually died, Senator Wiener's bill that would have removed CEQA for office to resi conversions and helped us with some tax credit funding for workforce type housing downtown. The state killed it. It's a bummer. There's another one pending that will help use property tax increment towards fostering those conversions, and that will pile on top of a measure that Mayor Breed put in the ballot earlier this year in March that the voters passed that waives transfer tax on residential conversions. So as we start piling in those financial incentives, and as the market changes and as the economy grows, I mean, residential is hard to build even without those challenges of office to resi conversion right now, we will see some of those things change. It's going to take a long time and it's going to be hard, but we do hard things all the time here, and that will happen. And I think the other frank thing about that is we're going to see also some of those buildings get torn down and change. And that doesn't happen easily or quickly either. But some of those buildings, particularly the Class C office buildings, are past their useful life.
What's a Class C office building?
A not good one. It's the easiest way to say it. It's not.
Is it better than a D office building?
I don't think we even have that.
Well, think of everything around like us right now as being Class A. So like Salesforce Tower being like the far end of the spectrum. Class C is when you move closer to or down Market Street, older buildings, maybe built between the 50s and 70s, maybe 80s too.
No historic value, no new value.
Yeah.
Kind of in the middle.
Okay.
Short ceilings, bad views. There's stuff like that, and that'll happen over time.
Is that already
tomorrow.
happening?
I mean, unfortunately, development is not, we're not in a great period right now. Interest rates and the general economy, construction costs have made that even pre-pandemic, it was getting really hard, and the pandemic took the wind out of those sails. So construction overall in San Francisco, it will recover, and we're seeing some of that in the residential market. Probably one of the bright spots in our economic report that we get every month from our city economist is we are seeing both the value of residential tick up. It's still not where it makes sense to build net new, but it's getting better.
Mm-hmm. So I have another question from an audience member here that actually is interesting as we talk again about like downtown potentially being the heart of a city. Mm-hmm. What cities do you look to for models of a successful downtown revitalization?
Well,
Simon.
New York City. I think, I was there, I lived in New York City for 20 years, and I was there on September 11th, and, the lower Manhattan had a lot of Class C office space before September 11th, but it really was an incredible crisis, obviously, for the entire city. And over 20 years, thanks to some really solid planning and some incentives that the Economic Development Corporation in New York City was able to apply, like they have now, 20 years later, Lower Manhattan is a thriving mixed-use neighborhood that, during the pandemic was a real bright spot. So I think it's definitely possible, and with the right kind of economic development policies and incentives and changes in the economic landscape, it's definitely possible.
When you think of New York and what's changed in 20 years, what are some of the examples, specific examples you can point to? Like not just by name, but like by description, so we could kind of envision, is that applicable here?
Well, I think, one of the things about the New York example, the Lower Manhattan example that I gave, is that there was a lot of investment in parks and cultural facilities, and so arts and entertainment were a definite part of how Lower Manhattan came back. Open space, parks, entertainment, transportation, all across the board. I think I'm excited because in San Francisco, and New York is famous for small businesses too, in San Francisco, I think we have an opportunity to bring small businesses downtown in a way that they never had an opportunity to do before. Pre-pandemic, small businesses couldn't really afford the rents downtown. Now, because of the economic landscape, and thanks to programs like Vacant to Vibrant, I think that there's a real opportunity for small businesses to find a place downtown and to thrive while the downtown recovers. So it's going to take, I'd want to defer to Sarah about how long it's going to take, but it's going to take years, and it's going to be slow going, and we want to make sure that small businesses and artists and culture and entertainment is really at the heart of defining a new neighborhood for downtown.
And we'll get into some more of the initiatives that SF New Deal is working on right now. But I want to ask that question to both of you, Kevin and Sarah, also. Are there other cities around the world that you have seen as a good model for a revitalization of a downtown?
Different ones in different ways. New York, of course. Montreal is one that is strong for me because of how they really have built their downtown and their destination as a city on the art scene. They've done some really creative aspects in terms of both performing arts and physical art embedded in the landscape that has acted as a draw for tourism and is really a part of what Montreal residents, Montrealians, I don't know what they call themselves, think of themselves as their culture. Yeah.
Can you paint a picture of it for me? Like if I were in Montreal downtown, like what would I be seeing?
You'd be out later than you are here, first of all, right? And there'd be a lot of lights. I don't know how to describe it other than a feeling of the arts, both in, music coming out of the bars and art in the sidewalk, just permeating your experience there. So it's really part of what you do. Look, there's other cities that have, Pittsburgh has been a great example of how they used higher education to really transform who and how they've attracted businesses and built up their kind of workforce sector. So that's another example that's been really interesting.
And that's interesting because that's something that Mayor Breed has brought up. And then also we have the UC Law expanding campus downtown also.
Yep. It's a real one, so that's one we're looking at. And then the last one I'll add, and this is more on the conceptual planning level, Boston has this really cool thing called the Housing Innovation Lab, where they pilot things. They even pilot zoning. They'll take a part of the city and say, you know what, we're going to try this crazy density bonus different program here for 3 years, and then we'll look at it and see if it worked and see if we want to continue it and see if we want to expand it to other parts of the city. And it's proved a really interesting way of making things happen more quickly because you sidestep the political will that's needed to make a wholesale change, and you say, we're just looking at it here as a pilot. So
I was going to ask about the politics with that. Like, how does that survive administration to administration?
That's a good question. And we're certainly going to face that question ourselves here shortly. I don't know if I'm as worried about that in San Francisco now, though. Again, I do think the fact that maybe a year or two post-pandemic, there were people who thought we could just continue to hold our breath and we'd go back to normal. I don't think anyone thinks that now. And so I do think there's a whole lot of common will towards the solutions that we're all talking about that I'm not worried about changing with the change of the administration, although it's a good thing to watch for.
Mm-hmm. And
I
Kevin.
haven't been to these places personally, but I will say that I think the think tank community is often bringing up places like Detroit or Calgary a lot. And what I've noticed from reading that research is that these recoveries or these kind of renaissances have taken decades to kind of unfold, right? And to Sarah's point, we're just coming off of our whatever you want to call it, our peak and our kind of cataclysmic event. So I think across the board, you just see that all those urban planners are leaning into what works, what brings people out, and we're starting to see trickles of that here. And I think you hear Detroit mentioned a lot in terms of whenever we throw the first Thursday parties here, it's just leaning into stuff like that slowly changes people's perceptions about empty spaces over time. And yeah, I mean, I was reading that like conversions are higher in Calgary, but and also in Los Angeles, and that's because, yeah, you have a combination of just enough time passing in which the real estate churn can happen, in which you can have certain owners or developers who are motivated and have expertise enough to turn buildings around. But yeah, it's unsexy, and people don't want to hear that here when they're when they're in debt and they're in trouble and they're that the turnaround might take longer than we'd like, but that's just kind of how it goes. Yeah.
It's interesting you talk about some of the different events that take place, though, and how that can affect perception, because I think more than ever that perception trumps reality. And so when you have a lot of the national media talking about a doom loop, or you have a lot of cameras on a certain part, and there are questions about homelessness here that we'll get to, actually, that is obviously an issue with downtown, that is obviously a difficult one to solve. But if you change the perception that people have and the story that people are telling, then you can really change the momentum that's going on in a city. And that's going to bring me, actually, unless you wanted to add something to this.
I just wanted to add, I like Kevin's answer, because both Calgary and Detroit, and I naturally want to mention New York all the time. I haven't been to Calgary or Detroit, but both those cities had really pre-existing crises. Like, they are not doing pandemic recovery. They have had decades-long crises. Calgary had empty office vacancy crisis for 20 years. And same, obviously, with Detroit, with the clearing out of the city. And we recently met with the mayor of Detroit, and it was a really inspiring story that he told about the ability of the city, through an economic development agency, to run a program called Motor City Match, which is sort of related to Vacant to Vibrant in the sense that it helped to create an entrepreneurial sort of ecosystem in Detroit and to fill a lot of the neighborhoods in Detroit. So I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from cities that have been in crisis for decades, as we recover from.
And they had to go through their, is it 7 stages of grief too? I think we were all, and like Sarah was saying earlier, it's like the initial years, I think everyone's in denial. You don't want to admit that, we're in a hole. You want to be like, okay, like let's just wait this out and it'll be 2019 again, because it was just there, so yeah.
Well, let's get into some of the new initiatives that you're working on. And we'll start with you, Simon. I know that there's the second cohort, the rolling cohort you're talking about. There's also a program called SF Energy.
Yes, Downtown Energy.
Downtown Energy.
Yes, we're partnered with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development.
Good partners.
Yet again, an example of where they gave us a very clear goal to invest in entertainment and nightlife downtown. We were able to, and we recently announced just this week, 14 grants of up to $50,000. We're spending $500,000 of the Office of Economic and Workforce Development's money in order to invest in small businesses, entertainment venues, cultural spaces, to really create, to make sure that we are investing in nightlife and entertainment, especially. So it's all supporting new arts and entertainment programming in downtown. All the neighborhoods that you could list: Mid-Market, the East Cut, downtown, the Financial District, SoMa. So all of the neighborhoods broadly defined as downtown, we are able to, in partnership with OEWD, to really, and some of the programming has already started. So you can look at the SF New Deal website. There's a whole list of the grantees that sfnewdeal.org, and we're really excited to be investing in, again, the small businesses that are really going to turn to create this window on the future of downtown that we, San Francisco, can be the ones that actually creates the new downtown.
And what are those grants going to specifically? Like, what are we going to see that's different, or are already seeing that's a little bit different?
So there's a lot of long-standing, venues. We're supporting the Stud and the Oasis. We're supporting the Crossing in the East Cut. We're going to be supporting a circus coming back to the Crossing.
And the Crossing is fairly new overall, isn't it?
It's a new park in the temporary Transbay Terminal. When they moved the Transbay Terminal to the Salesforce Park, to the Transbay Terminal.
Yeah, and a multi-purpose park that has, I've seen workout classes there. I've seen soccer games there. There's limitless things.
So Downtown Energy is just investing in existing venues that are doing new programming, and it's theater, it's music, it's drag, it's all sorts of social scenes.
Mm-hmm. And how about, that's one of the things that Office of Economic and Workforce Development is investing in?
Yeah, Downtown Energy is part of a whole platform we have of really trying to bring arts, entertainment, and culture out into the streets and make that a reason for coming downtown. There's a bunch of other things attached to that. We are launching our first of several entertainment zones where we're going to try to create, New Orleans within our blocks, right? And that's rather than creating a street party where you're bringing outside vendors and selling their stuff, how do you get existing bars and restaurants to be able to come out onto the street and have a street party on a semi-regular basis?
And one of those is on Front Street, right?
The first one will be on Front Street, that's right.
And a
So that's our
Downtown Energy
pilot.
grantee.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So that's an example. The SF Live Outdoor Concert Series is another one that we sponsored and launched that's happening all over the city with several downtown, including Union Square events in the Union Square Plaza. That's really exciting. We just contracted with, I don't know if folks know Bryant Park in New York, but Bryant Park is a really exciting public space that is activated on a daily basis. And we brought in the folks from New York who do that park to activate Union Square Plaza. And we're going to have a year of them activating that park on a daily basis. We're going to try to make that into a place where people want to be, and it's part of the everyday fabric. And it doesn't matter if you know what's happening or not, or you have an SF weekly calendar that's happening. You just go there and there's something you can participate in and be a part of. So that's a pretty exciting one as well. There's even smaller stuff. We are mid-market. We consider downtown all the way from Van Ness to the Ferry Building. So it's a pretty broad swath. And we have a lot of interventions in mid-market. We have a program called Busket where we're actually seed funding buskers to do street performances out on the sidewalk to try to activate that. So that's just on the entertainment and enlivening the streets platform. There's a lot more we can talk about at conversions and business attractions, but I
Well,
think
talk
those are
about that a
less
little
fun.
bit, because we have been talking about kind of arts and entertainment, nightlife, that sort of thing, which can change perception, change a vibe. But yeah, what are some of the other things?
So on the straight up business development side, there's a lot. We need to build San Francisco's ecosystem of new and smaller businesses, and that doesn't just mean ground floor. I think with our partnership with SF New Deal and the number of grant programs that we have storefront opportunity grants, we have SF Shines, which is our physical improvement grant. We have a whole lot of grant programs that help small businesses pay for and start up in a storefront, and vacant environment is just one example of that. The upper stories is where we have a lot of the vacancy. And we will, right? I think the reality is the way folks work is going to be different over the long term, and we can't just cross our fingers and hope people come back 5 days a week. So we want more businesses downtown to be part of the activity and to be part of the mixed use of the entertainment and new residential and student folks that we have going on. So last year, we approved a new office tax credit that gives any new business that hasn't been in San Francisco just for 3 years, it's not ever, just for the last 3 years moving back in, a pretty significant credit on their gross receipts tax, which is the primary business tax that they pay in San Francisco. We've rolled back some planned increases on the tax side that were supposed to hit post-pandemic, and the mayor was able to do that for a long time. There's a group of stakeholders out in the restaurant, hotel, and broader business community that have, with the city's input, placed a ballot measure on that will change our business tax system in my view, for the better. It will do a lot of things that will make it easier for businesses to start, grow, and stay in San Francisco, not the least of which is expanding the small business exemption to 5 million, almost doubling it from where it is today.
Which measure is that?
I don't know if it has a letter.
I think they just came out with them, but
Yeah, and I am certainly not endorsing it. I'm just I'm educating you about what is in that.
Fair.
But it will also include a whole lot of waivers of fees along with that. So one of the things that we noticed in doing that is that our tax structure is progressive, but our fee structure in terms of business registration, shared spaces fees, it's flat. So if you're a tiny business, you're paying the same in your fees that a huge business is paying. And so we're going to be able to waive a bunch of those too, which I think will make a big difference for small business. So that's really exciting. I mentioned the residential conversion that we're doing. And then we're really just taking an individual look at site opportunities. The Macy's building is one, right? I think I am very optimistic that, we're not going to lose Macy's, but we still have opportunities over the long term of what that building, becomes at the heart of Union Square. The Westfield Shopping Center, San Francisco Center as it's called now, is another huge opportunity site we're working with. The re-tenanting of that is actually going very well, but it obviously has a long-term future that's probably going to look a little different. So we're making sure to partner with building owners on those places where we're sure transitions are going to happen.
very interesting. I didn't realize that about the Macy's potential and then also the San Francisco Center. Yeah, we'll see.
And although it's not a single site, we're working in this next year to bring Vacant to Vibrant to Powell Street, to Union Square. And it's going to be a very different model because there are very large floor plates on Powell Street, but we're going to be concentrating and trying to fill 4 to 6 storefronts on Powell Street to really create, again, a window on what a future retail environment in Union Square could be and really activate what is a premier tourist destination for the city. I mean, everyone's lining up to get on the cable car, and right now there's just vacant storefronts all around. So I think we're really excited to be able to bring that model, an adapted model of Vacant to Vibrant to Powell Street.
Interesting. So, Kevin, as you listen to this and as you've been observing this as a business reporter on San Francisco, have you been seeing meaningful change? Like, how rapid do you see it happening or not happening? Like, what's your observation?
First, I'd like to turn the downtown mall into a casino because I feel like that would check a lot of boxes. I'm kidding.
You're not the first person to say that.
So yeah, it's not going to happen as fast as people want. It just can't. Something like the downtown San Francisco Mall, like it's still going through a huge like ownership battle right now. It's under receivership. So, and then you extrapolate this to all ends of real estate. Owners of multifamily buildings, owners of the hotels that is so pivotal to the city's tax base. All of that needs to churn through. And I was talking to Sarah about this backstage. Is that like the thing about San Francisco is like on the ground level, we have this huge groundswell of like entrepreneurial local spirit that wants to do something, wants to participate in the city. And then you have this up top, this really unsexy, big money, oftentimes not always from here as well, interests that still need to work through their situations. So those are the two kind of poles that are leading to what we have now, which is, we're in 2024 and we're still trying to scratch the surface at redefining the city and, what we think it should be for and who it should be for.
Thank you. So I have another audience question here, and this relates to a lot of, again, back to the perception issues and the reality as well. What is happening with public safety downtown to ensure safe streets and to give people confidence in that? Now, that's none of your areas exactly, but it does obviously affect them.
Maybe I'll start because obviously it's the city's responsibility, right, to keep our streets safe and clean. And I think we're making incredible strides on that, strides that aren't always reflected in the media and frankly in people's perception, and perception matters. In terms, our homeless count is down. The number of shelter and permanent beds that we've built up and occupied is up. On the crime scene, almost every level of crime from basic property crime to violent crime is down, anywhere from 15% to as much as 40% on the violent crime side. So we're seeing significant progress. It doesn't mean it's enough. And it still doesn't mean that when you see something negative, it doesn't have an enormous impact on you. I think we've had incredible, we talked about partnerships. The partnership that has expanded over the last couple of years between our San Francisco Police Department, our DA's office, our interagency groups like DMAC, which is our kind of drug interagency coalition that meets regularly, includes people from my office and all of the offices that I mentioned, that meets on a weekly basis for some of our hotspots like the Tenderloin, is an incredible place of resource sharing. And then what we've really done over the last couple of years that I think is new and innovative, and we're still figuring out how to sustain, is developed a community safety network that supplements SFPD, right? And those are our ambassador programs. Some are run by firms like Urban Alchemy, but there's a number of other providers, Code Tenderloin, others that are out there in the streets that are not armed, that are often deeply steeped in the language of some of the people that are having challenges on the street and really know how to work with them, and that also are educated in how do I connect you to city resources now, not later, but how do I get someone here if you're in crisis now to deal with you on a mental health side, on a drug side, overdose correction. They can perform all of those things. The other thing that we found that really works on the public safety side is holding down the public space with activation. So our police can only do so much. They can come through and they can stop negative activity, whether that's actually illegal or it's burgeoning drug trade or what have you. The police can't stay there in one spot, right, and cover the whole city. We're still only at about 75 to 80% of what we need in terms of personnel on SFPD, and that's true across the country, by the way. That's not a San Francisco problem, that's a police problem across the nation, and we're still working on recruitment to fix that. But in the meantime, we don't even have the police we need to cover the city, and we can't have people stay there. So these ambassador programs and frankly, some of our neighborhood merchant groups need to be out there holding the spaces after SFPD comes through to make sure that negative activity doesn't pop up again. And there are more creative ways of holding the space too. The activations that we have, First Thursdays, activations in public streets, street vendors even, when they're illegal, can provide the positive replacement of holding a space. It's when a street becomes empty that you really see that negative activity pop up. And frankly, that's what the pandemic provided a lot of, and that's what we're still working our way down from. But I think we're making good progress.
This is a question I think that we'll start with you, at least, Kevin, from the audience. What does the AI boom mean for San Francisco? And does proposed regulation impact whether companies may locate themselves in the city?
I'll take the second part first. The regulation, obviously, if you poll founders, they'll be pretty outspoken about it. But once you get underneath that noise, the majority of venture capital and the activity and the innovation and the prime engineering talent is still based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that has not changed despite headlines of certain people leaving for supposed greener pastures in Texas or whatever. So that's still based here. And the people forget that because, again, they're attracted to the headlines. What it means for the future is still up for debate because I think there's two parts. We don't necessarily know what the business model is going to be in terms of how these things end up making money and create jobs.
That's an interesting point. Seems
right.
how we've been through .com booms and so forth.
Right. And the rise of AI won't necessarily be the same as the rise of Twitter or Airbnb, Uber, that whole economy as well. I think people want it to be that way because we want to fill our office spaces and whatnot. But just through the nature of that, it's not going to be that way. So that's something to look out for. All the growth is centered here in terms of AI. But again, when you zoom out, it's not adding as many jobs as the previous tech boom did. And that's something to keep in mind. But they are the ones right now shopping for the best office spaces. So all the brokers are sucking up to them. They're taking up the subleases, right? Meta, Uber, all those spaces, even Airbnb now, they're all being subleased by these emerging AI companies. So yeah, there's hope in that front, and that they are the ones generating activity. But again, huge question marks in terms of the other side of it.
And part of this question asks about the proposed regulations. I mean, I don't know if you have any feel for that from the Office of Economic
I'm going to plead
Workforce
the fifth
Development.
on that one.
Yeah? Okay. All right. So we have audience here and online, and people who will be listening to this later or watching this later. What role do you think that people who are here and care have in helping to protect and strengthen downtown? Let's start with you, Simon.
Yeah, I think Sarah said something in answer to the first question about the importance of human connection. And I think, I was thinking in Kevin's answer about AI, it's like whatever happens with AI, at the heart of it, it's all going to be about human connection. And so I think that one of the things we believe at SF New Deal is that small business is actually play like an unsung role in the ability for people to connect with each other. On our commercial corridors and now downtown, the small businesses there actually create a place for people to connect both with the small business owners, but also with each other, like in pretty significant ways. And it creates sort of the cultural vibrancy and obviously the economic dynamism that we really love about this city. And so I would say, like, support your small business. I would come downtown and experience what it's like to think about what the future of downtown is going to be, because the future of downtown is going to be different than the 2019 version. And we have a chance in San Francisco to build it. And small business is going to be a key part of it.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question is, what do you think that the audience here or San Franciscans can have in helping to protect and strengthen downtown?
Oh, yeah. I mean, see it as your neighborhood. That's really the important thing. And look, downtown hasn't felt like anyone's neighborhood for a long time, so it's a strong road. But in urban planning terms, what a really healthy, strong downtown should be you have your neighborhood, and then this is the neighborhood for all the neighborhoods where you all come together. We missed that by letting office space kind of be the dominant factor and office work be the dominant factor, and mistakes were made here by the sheer strength of our economy where we kind of pushed that out. So if folks really start, and the work is on us to create the reasons to come downtown, but if it becomes that meta neighborhood for all the neighborhoods, that is what is really going to make it the heart of the city. And frankly, that in turn will lead to business generation and innovative ideas and more small business. But that's kind of how we need to see it. And all the transit goes there, so it's not that hard. You can get there.
Kevin, what do you think? What do you think that our audience here or San Franciscans should do to protect and strengthen downtown?
Well, our audience is here at 6 p.m. on a weekday, so I want to commend all of you guys for being a part of the community. I will just point this mostly towards the business community, which is often the loudest in terms of criticizing the city and its state. I will say that community should participate in this as well. And they have, in terms of you need willing landlords to participate in Vacant to Vibrant, right? So we need more of that. People who are not just gonna complain about how things are or how unfriendly the climate is. Participate in the version of San Francisco you want to see next. And that goes down to, building owners, employers, participate in that. And I think we're starting to see that now. For example, Salesforce, just the largest private employer in town, just did a 180 on its, remote work policy. Now it's going to mandate a return to office starting in October. So it's oh, wow. Yeah, geez, shout out. But yeah, it's just to both of these people's point, participate in it too. Is the call to action.
Nice. Okay. Those people might not work for Salesforce. All right. So I'd like to conclude with this question. What does an active, vibrant, transformed city look like in the future? And I'm going to give a little context before you answer that, some history. I've been doing some reporting on rideshare programs now that self-driving Waymos are available to all San Franciscans and are rapidly expanding down the peninsula. Waymo began in 2009. It was called Google's self-driving car project. And that was 15 years ago. That same year, Uber got its start here in San Francisco. Last year, Uber provided more than 9 billion rides worldwide. So the world changes a lot in 15 years. So let's project 15 years ahead here in San Francisco. And I'll ask the question again. What does an active, vibrant, transformed San Francisco look like then? And let's start with you on this one, Kevin.
Jeez, a softball question. 15 years from now?
Yeah.
So that will bring us near like 2040. Am I doing my math right?
Right.
I'm hoping that it will be filled with not just tech workers, but like artists and creatives that we like to romanticize or kind of wax nostalgic about in this city. I'm hopeful that this great commercial reset or this real estate reset will bring those people back and make it more affordable for people, and that we have a truly mixed use city that doesn't have swaths of vacancies, in which, you know, especially ground level retail shops can be filled with people who are willing to be here and want to be here. So I'm hoping to see a combination of all of that, Ben. Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely a hopeful vision. What do you think, Sarah? What in 15 years does an active, vibrant, transformed San Francisco look like?
Well, first of all, California Forever, the recently withdrawn ballot measure in Solano County, has folded, and all of that energy has been redirected towards downtown San Francisco. That means our regions and our residents agree that San Francisco is going to be the place where the action is, right? And so as a part of that, we've spent the last 15 years investing in our transportation network, in our park system, continuing to invest in our small business ecosystem, so we have the support network in place to support that kind of growth and investment. Work is an activity, not a land use. So it permeates downtown in a much more flexible way than we think about it now. It's about the agglomeration of humans in different places and not a headquarters building, but there still is an active workforce downtown. We've met our housing element goals, so the residents are thriving here. 24-hour district, of course. I'd really like to see, and I think we can get there. It's going to be a slow process as well, but we have an expanded higher education presence downtown. So we're rivaling Chicago or Boston, who have 4 times the amount of students that we have downtown. And those people are studying in 24-hour coffee shops and eating late night falafel and really thriving on our streets. And then the last part, which I'd really like to see, and I don't know if we'll pull it off in 15 years, is that we've fixed Market Street. I don't know how, but we finally fixed it.
All right. Appreciate it.
And
All right.
casino.
And Simon, in 15 years, what does an active, vibrant, transformed San Francisco look like?
Yeah, I think at its heart, I mean, it's an incredible, booming, vibrant neighborhood, set of neighborhoods, including a neighborhood for the neighborhoods, downtown, that is actually a place where people are doing all sorts of different things. They're enjoying arts and entertainment. They're going to university. They're living there. They're going to these parks that are active and programmed. And people want to come here from all over the world, even more so than they do today. And so I think it's a vibrant, beautiful city. And I think to pull in the answer I gave before, which is small business has to be really a part of that, because it's got to be easy to start and operate a small business in San Francisco. So my wish and my vision would be we as a city make it easier from a regulatory point of view, from a permitting point of view, from just the way that our own choices support small businesses, that we are a city of small businesses where anyone can come to San Francisco and have an idea, and it's easy to start a small business and participate in an incredibly diverse and active city, a vibrant city.
Wonderful. Simon Bertrand, Sarah Dennis Phillips, and Kevin Wynn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time that we have. We thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insights and on-the-ground experience. Thank you also to our audience who, yes, took an afternoon to come out here, and the people who are watching elsewhere. As we've heard, the future is what we make of it, and we really encourage you to be a part of it here in the heart of San Francisco. There's a lot going on. Taking part helps shape a city that will be responsive to our visions. So what's next? Join us for our next program in the What's Good San Francisco Summer Series on August 29th. We'll feature California's Chief Service Officer Josh Friday, among others, as we dig into the role of community and service in building our future together. If you'd like to engage in future programs or support Commonwealth Club World Affairs, please visit the website at commonwealthclub.org. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. My name is Ben Trefny. Thanks so much.